Your order management piece can handle things, routing and inventory in real time. It's something that an ERP isn't really set up to do.
Today's episode is about a simple truth in B2B that orders are messy, and not just a little bit complicated. I mean messy. Split shipments, substitutions, back orders, contract pricing, partial approvals, dropship, multiple warehouses, multiple ERPs, the kind of messy that looks fine in a cart but then turns into chaos behind the scenes. So I talked to Ty Sweet from KIBO Commerce. Ty works in the e-commerce platform, order management or OMS world, and he's really good at turning this whole topic into something practical. We talk about what an OMS actually does, why real-time inventory matters more than most teams think, and where companies get confused between ERP and OMS, and how the brain of fulfillment, order orchestration, decides what ships from where and when. If you've ever had a customer go sideways and everyone's pointing the fingers, this one's for you. I hope you enjoy it. I like an episode where we can have like a single theme that kind of runs through an episode. And I think today's episode, the things we've talked about in preparing for this, Ty, is going to be that type of episode. So we're going to focus today on this idea of that B2B orders are messy, which is absolutely true. We have split shipments, substitutions, back orders, contract pricing, partial approvers. So with all this messiness, like how do we order this and how do we think through this idea of B2B orders? And I'm excited to talk about this, but I just want to start here. When you walk into a typical manufacturer distributor, what are the order problems, in quotes, that everybody's kind of complaining about or that you hear often?
Yeah, and it's a great question. And I think, kind of everything you mentioned about, splitting shipments and being able to supply real-time inventory and where's our inventory and what does that look like? But you start to get into, they've specific customers, right? So a B2B business may have, higher profile customers or lower profile customers. And how do you make sure that you're getting everyone, the inventory that they're expecting in a timely fashion? Whether that is, again, looking at something like, your inventory in real time. Where do we have this? Where is it coming from? How do we get it to where it needs to go? But then how do we satisfy kind of higher profile clients? And if that means, like you mentioned, splitting an order, or hey, I can get you some now, I can get you some later, or whatever that is, there's a real-time aspect to that an order management system is more capable to handle. You see a lot of traditional B2B companies that will rely on ERPs for a lot of this stuff, and ERPs are great. But you got to use them for what they're for, right? That they're going to be more of your final reconciliation, financial aspects. You can have some inventory aspect there, but your updates are happening in batches. And so it becomes a lot more difficult to use an ERP for real-time decision-making. That's where an order management system is really gonna break through. And so it's funny because the B2B industry is the largest as far as revenue, creation and just it's the biggest. It's really the 800-pound gorilla in the room. But you can look at a lot of the technology, and it's very kind of always been where it was, right? We're still using EDI for a lot of things, on the commerce side, and so. This, you hate to say this world is transitioning, but this world is transitioning, right? I think the bulk of B2B buyers at this point are no longer Gen Xers, right? They're millennials and moving on down that generational ladder. And what you find is those generation of buyers are looking to do it in more of a B2C fashion. So I mean, that's more of the commerce side of that, right? But I think it matters to the orders as well, right? People expect to receive orders in the way that they ordered them, and if they're not going to, is there any type of communication, and when does that come, and how do we understand that? So I would say those are the biggest
Yeah, and
things,
I
Justin.
think, if you think about how orders were taken before e-commerce was done, I mean, you often had a branch manager that kind of knew the priority of like where inventory should go to what customers, right? So if you got guys taking orders on the phone, they can be talking like, I need, you know, I need to reserve this amount of inventory for this customer. They're a higher priority, higher segment customer. And so we've got to make some decisions on the smaller customer about how they get it. But all that kind of happens in minds and communications between a few people. And now we've got orders that are happening with automation or automatically without people in the middle. Like, how do all those get routed? Where do you see all these kind of issues show up first? Is it customer service, warehouse, sales, finance? Like, where are you kind of seeing the results of that?
It's really kind of all the above. You're really seeing it these days because, B2B has transitioned more into that omni-channel space for the commerce, right? It used to be before you had sales reps that would go out and they're visiting individual businesses and they're taking orders. And there's still part of that happens. But that's not the only way, right? And as B2B slowly transitions into more, looks closer like a B2C, I don't know that it'll ever truly get there just because those two worlds are not really the same. There's too much, customizable stuff that happens, customizable products, things like that happen in the B2B space that require a lot more of that interpersonal relationships, whether that be with customer service or a sales rep. But I mean, like I said, there's still orders coming in through EDI, and so that's kind of a, you're not really, talking with somebody kind of one on one in that situation. You kind of understand
Yeah,
what it is that you need to order. I've talked to B2B businesses that are still, going online and looking up the products that they need to order, and then putting those in an email and
sure.
firing those off to the business, right? And that's how they create orders. And so there's so many different ways that these things come in, that those touch points are kind of all over the place. And so when that happens, you're raising, not only the complexity of that order ingestion piece, but then, like you mentioned, kind of the routing. And I think the routing piece is a little bit more easily solved, right? That's really what order management is kind of set up for. In order management services are really, out there doing in the first place, right? As orders are coming in, depending on specific channels or specific sites, or however you want to break out, how those orders are being ingested, you can really kind of design how those orders are going to be routed and really take in a lot of different information and really get complex with those things and say, all right, I want to look at this location in this area based off of the inventory that they've got available, but I don't want to split. And if splitting is inevitable, then I want to look at this whole other scenario, to be able to do this in a more cost effective way. And again, the world we kind of live in today with APIs and all of that allow us to do this in more of a real time fashion. You could start querying carrier
Mm,
rates. You get in maybe to LTLs, which is less than truckload, which is more of, how are we getting this from, where we have it to where the business needs it, right? Whether that's a job site or a yard or just their individual warehouses, or however that's going to go. There's so many more options that we have now to be able to get that product there. So, when you talk about the complexity of the orders coming in, you could talk about the orders of the complexity, or the complexity of the orders as they're being kind of routed or set up for how they're going to be sent out, then how that distribution network works. And then what does that last mile look like? So, that's the key with B2B, is there's a lot of complexity that goes into it. And so while there's a lot of dependence on the traditional kind of, this is the way it's always been, there are tools out there now, and have been for some time, that are set up to handle a lot of these, especially once we get into very complex stuff, a lot better than maybe the traditional tools that these businesses have used.
we've used the term a couple of times. Let's define this. How would you define what OMS is? Like, what does it stand for? What does it do, in general?
Yeah. Oh, so order management is, OMS is order management software. It's typically coupled to like an e-commerce software, right? Where an e-commerce is going to house all of your catalog information and things like discounts and all of your order taking information, right? So when you go to a website, whatever your favorite website is, all of the products that they list there, all of that is going to be more of the e-commerce. The order management is what happens once the order's been placed, right? So once you hit checkout, look, I'm ready to go, that order's got to go somewhere, right? It's got to go somewhere to be fulfilled. So it could be a simple operation where maybe it's just one warehouse or maybe one store and they handle it all in house. It's very simple, but obviously you can get very, very complex with distribution networks and warehouse management systems. But when it comes down to it, that order has to go somewhere, and order management systems allow you to, or kind of users to look at the complexity of the order and say, okay, based off of what is on this order, where should we send this? Again, very simple ones. You just go, all right, it's going to go to our warehouse. And if we have it, we have it. And if we don't, we don't. And we'll send out an email and say, hey, your order's been back ordered or whatever that is. But for these larger, more complex setups, there may be multiple locations where maybe it can fulfill the entire order altogether. Fantastic. We'll send it there, and it's cost effective. It's close to where it's going to be shipped to. Maybe it's even within the same town. That's fantastic. But once you start getting into having to split that order up over multiple locations, that starts to get into the complexity, right? So that's really what your order management system is taking care of, is kind of taking that order, understanding what it is that is kind of being asked for within that order, whether it's one line item or 1,000 line items. And then what's the best way we can go about fulfilling this order based on specific rules that we have set up, right? What is it that we're trying to do? Are we trying to avoid splitting at all costs? Or is it more of we really are cost conscious? And so we don't mind if we have to split this 10 different ways. We could always choose to reconsolidate it too. That's one of the great things about more modern order management software systems, is you can do that kind of reconsolidation of an order, right? So you can send a main order to one location and then send out a bunch of transfer orders that will send everything back to a single location. So if that's the case, you're trying to keep it together, there's rules that you can set up for that. But there's all sorts of rules and all sorts of logic that can be set up within an order management system that's going to help get that order, get that shipment to the end user and users in the most efficient way possible.
As you were saying that, I was thinking about how there's also there's rules for you as a manufacturer or distributor, how you prefer to handle this. But I'm sure there's also rules per customer. Like a customer says, I don't want split shipments on this order or this job, because I have to have it all together. I got to check it in all together, whatever it might be. I think the second point is an easy way of thinking this too is, a lot of you all out there have multiple ERPs, right? You maybe have SAP for your main, but you have Infor and Epicor with different acquisitions you made. When you get an order, where does that order go, right? Where does that order? Should that order go to SAP, or should it go to Epicor or Infor, depending on the brand and the acquisition? And that, I think that's a great way to kind of classify that routing capabilities, as you mentioned. I'm curious, where do people get confused between ERP and OMS, because the lines start to feel a little blurred? What should happen in the ERP versus what should happen in OMS? Or even a better question for Itai is, when should they separate those two functions?
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, this is kind of a hotly contested thing. For me, you look at it in a very specific way. Like ERP is very crucial to your reconciliation, right? It needs to have knowledge of an order being placed just for final revenue reconciliation and order reconciliation and a lot of these record keeping pieces that you need. So it's crucial that the ERP is at least aware of everything that is happening, because it's the one piece you're going to go to and say, all right, what did revenue look like this quarter? Your order management could do that, but really that's what ERPs are set up for. Your order management piece is the one that's going to say, again, it can handle things in as far as routing and inventory in real time, right? It's something that an ERP isn't really set up to do. It can do it, but it's going to do it in batches, and so you're never really going to know exactly where you're at in real time. So if you're trying to figure out which location has the inventory you need, ERP is not going to be really up to date. So, I think that's where you really have to start to separate those two, right? And keep the ERP as the system of record for everything that is happening within your business, especially within the order management piece. As shipments get shipped, as payments get collected, all of those things that are happening, the ERP needs to be aware of, but it shouldn't be handling more of your real-time functions, like I mentioned. The order management, the inventory piece, and the order routing or order orchestration, especially. Like you said, you mentioned at the beginning of the question about getting into specific businesses and how do they want their orders routed, right? And all of that can be set up within an order management, right? You get into some of the order extensibility and say, all right, this specific business or these specific businesses, or however you want to set up the logic on that, can all be done. And all of that decision making can be happening in real time. And this is before we even get into the advent of adding AI into it. This is just modern order management systems handling complex routing logic or order orchestration logic based on traditional business rules. And so that's really the separation of OMS and ERP for me.
You mentioned the word order orchestration, and what I know about, it's kind of the brain of fulfillment, right? It's kind of at the center. Like define what order orchestration is and why it's important.
Yeah, and we at KIBO call it order routing. So everybody's got a kind of different term for it, but I think order orchestration is probably the more prevalent industry term. So traditionally, right, that is going back into once an order has been received, how are we splitting this up, or how are we orchestrating or routing this specific order to make the best use of the business rules that are set up. Again, we talked about the individual logic, like you mentioned. A specific business doesn't want their order to be split. They're willing to wait if they can get everything together. And again, there's several different ways that you can go about that. Like I talked about order consolidation. But really, it's the rules that are written around what you want to have happen when an order comes in and you've got inventory in several different places. And depending on how you've got that set up, there are some businesses that traditionally keep different products in different locations. So you're almost always going to split an order because that's just the way it works. But traditionally, what we see is you want to minimize the amount that it's going to cost the business to ship that order out, right? Whether you're charging the business that's ordering from you for shipping, or you're covering that. You want to make that the most cost effective, because obviously that kind of makes the overall order the most cost effective. And then you start to get into the contractual stuff that also comes along with B2B, price lists, which we really haven't talked a whole lot about, but that's keeping pricing kind of the same. But really what we're talking about here is the overall shipping and carrier costs. And so traditionally, that is what order routing and order orchestration is trying to work around, is how do we get the products on this order to the end user in the most efficient and cost-effective way. And that's basically what order orchestration is built around.
I think another way to think about this too is, if you think about like the complex ordering, or a complex order that doesn't maybe look complex when you have it in a cart, but it's complex behind the scene. A customer orders 50 items. Those 50 items come from 3 warehouses in different locations, different states. Within those 50 items, you've got 2 dropship vendors, especially if you look kind of the distribution world. You have 2 dropship vendors, right? Manufacturers that it's not in stock anywhere, so they have to be routed to vendors. And then you have 1 item within that 50 that's back ordered. Like you can't cancel the whole order because 1 item is back ordered. So you have multiple, that 50 items gets broken down into a large algorithm of the potential orders that it's coming from and all the rules that's handled. And I think that's an easy way to kind of think about the value of order management and order orchestration. Is there a place, Ty, that people start when they start thinking about order management, order orchestration, routing, however you want to call it? Is there a place that companies typically implement first? Like it's the kind of the first set of rules they do? Is there any commonality across customers?
Yeah, I don't know that there's any specific commonality across customers when it comes to the order orchestration, because every business is so different. I mean, even businesses that look they could be automotive parts distributors may have internal business rules that look completely different. So I would say that if they don't, they should start where the biggest pain point is. Where are you experiencing the largest issues, right? Is it having way too many split orders, your shipping costs are costing too much? Then you need to look at that piece. I do know, having spoken with B2B experts and others that are out there in the industry that are speaking with a lot of these businesses that are out there, plus obviously the discussions that we have with businesses, is that it helps to talk to a wide swath of people within a business, right? So obviously your CTO or CIO is going to have quite a bit, quite a different viewpoint on what they think their issues are compared to the person who's on the warehouse floor actually picking orders. And there may be a disconnect there that neither side really realizes, right? And so until a business kind of understands from top to bottom where they're at and what their biggest struggles and their biggest pain points are, it's kind of tough to know where your jumping off point is. So really it's best to kind of discuss that. And even if that comes through some sort of discovery process, even if it's not an internal thing, that usually nets the best results in implementing, right? Because you could have the best rules in the world, but if they're not solving what is inherent to your business, what does it matter? So that's that. I mean, to me, it all starts with understanding where that's at, and then once you have the understanding there, it should be a pretty straightforward process. As we need to start here and move from point A to point B, and however that comes together from there.
You've mentioned inventory a couple of times in this conversation. Talk about, like, where does inventory sourcing fit into this? You mentioned earlier batch inventory. Like, why is this idea of updated every few hours inventory? Why is that a problem?
Because it never gives you an idea of really where you're at, right? If you're getting in hundreds or thousands of orders in an hour, more or less than that, whatever it is, then if your inventory is only updating every couple of hours, where are you at? How can you continue to promise, that you've got the inventory on hand? The worst thing that can happen is you've got people out there that are selling orders saying, hey, we'll have this to you next week, not realizing you're 100,000 units behind, and have no idea that that's going to happen, right? So real-time inventory helps to solve that issue because you're able to sell against what you've got available to sell. Plus, you can also do what you've got available to promise. And what that means is if you've got a manufacturer that you're dealing with, that you've got a PO out on specific, products that you're waiting on, KIBO can ingest that information and have that available as part of the inventory as well. So we can say, look, we've got 50 units of this right now that we can sell you. And then we've got another 1,000 that are coming in next Tuesday that we have the PO out against. We know that we're going to receive that in. And so once that's in and processed, we can have that to you by Friday or whatever that is. Whereas in traditional inventory, if you've got some idea of where it's at and know you've got a PO out there that's going to happen at some point, but we're not quite sure when that's coming in, but we'll try to get that to you as soon as we can. once we have a better understanding, it's more of that real-time information that you can then pass down the line, right? Again, the world's not a perfect place, and even with all of these systems in place, sometimes things get slightly askew. They're not, they're only as good as the information that you have, but the better information that you have, the better then you can then inform everyone else down the line. So that's where it gets way more important to have that that information readily available now, rather than, hey, let me see where we're at in a couple of hours.
I think when most companies or most people think about real-time inventory, Ty, they think about like just an API call to the ERP. Like when does that break down? Like when can it not be? I'm thinking about distributors implementing, an API call directly to Epicor, Eclipse or something like that. When is that no longer appropriate to have that kind of approach?
Yeah, again, if you're getting thousands of orders in an hour, is that API call keeping up? Like, or have you completely overloaded it? And then also, how are you reconciling inventory availability, right? Like, you can have something where you want to recognize products that are already sitting in someone's cart for a certain amount of time, because when they go to buy it, they want to ensure that what the inventory number that they just saw, or that they were made aware of what that was, is still actually there, right? So how do you recognize that inventory? And is the ERP recognizing that inventory? And if they're recognizing that inventory, then how are they, then producing inventory for the next call and doing all of those calculations while pushing all of that information back and forth over an API call? It's just a lot of information that can get passed back and forth, where in an OMS, it lives there inherently, right? So there is no real API call that's being made. It's all internal transfers of that information going, hey, look, this product is sitting in 50 carts right now at this limit. Based on that, this is the inventory that we have at this time, and that's all instantaneous, right? You're not waiting on, not that an API call takes forever. It's not, sending a letter or something like that. But ERPs can get bogged down with inventory, with everything else that they're trying to handle along, the reconciliation piece as well.
I think one of the, it's been pretty consistent here on the podcast, but one of the consistent things we talk about is, look, the customer, the contract that a customer has with a manufacturer or distributor, either way, like it changes how B2B commerce has to be implemented, because that contract has terms and conditions and pricing. How does, I would imagine it would be very helpful, but like, how does a OMS kind of help personalize fulfillment by customers versus using the ERP to do it?
Again, it goes into that order orchestration extensibility, right? So you can go into your order orchestration or order routing engine, where all of those decisions are being made in real time, right? That's where you kind of write out your business rules and say, if X happens, then we want to do Y, and if Y happens, then we want to split into two X's or do Z. It's very simple to kind of visualize, but obviously can get very, very complex. But based on the extensibility of, specific businesses, based on their attributes or however you want to define that, there are business rules that can be written specifically for them, right? So all of that, like I said, like when we were talking about the inventory piece, all of that can happen in real time. We're not waiting on calls back and forth to ERP going, all right, we tried this didn't work. What's the next thing? Okay, that didn't work. What's the next thing? This is all inherent within the order management system. So you can get very specific and very particular for your rules, like you mentioned, down to the individual business, and say this business prefers this over that, and have all of those business rules written into your order management routing system that allows you to then route that order or fulfill that order in the way that those businesses are expecting down the line, which helps. Again, if you're doing, thousands of inventory calls to your ERP, and then, hundreds of thousands of API calls to your ERP to get your order orchestration straight. Like, you can see where this starts to become a huge issue with your ERP trying to do something that really that's not really what ERPs were built to do. They can handle it, sure, but at scale, it really starts to break down. And that's really where B2B businesses can start to run into huge issues, because you're overloading and taxing that ERP engine with things that it wasn't really built to do. And again, you can bolt on, you can do a lot of things and solve some challenges, but then you start to get into this kind of Frankenstein ERP, where an OMS is just going to handle that. It's built out of the box to be able to do that.
So you work for KIBO Commerce, and talk about KIBO's journey into manufacturing and distribution.
Yeah, absolutely. So KIBO is a business that was kind of born out of 5 different pieces that were kind of brought together. One was an e-commerce, one was an order management, and they were brought together in and around 2016. And around 2017, 2018, our CTO at the time, who's now our CEO, Ram, decided that this kind of Frankenstein approach to our software offering just wasn't working. So at that point, we completely rebuilt our tech stack from the ground up. So KIBO, the way it stands now, is e-commerce, order management. We offer subscriptions. We've obviously got the agentic piece that we've got in there now. We handle all of the e-commerce through the order managers. We were talking about this earlier as an example. You go to a website and you're shopping products, right? That's your traditional kind of e-commerce. You think of Shopify, or some of those other e-commerce businesses that are out there. KIBO does that, the B2C, the B2B, the D2C, all the way through order management, right? All the way up until, you slap a label on a box and ship it out of the warehouse. So we're kind of full stack within that way. Our B2B, when we kind of first looked at it, it was born out of the traditional B2C and D2C businesses that we had. And so a lot of those pieces were there, but we've really built up the capabilities within the B2B platform to be able to do a lot of really custom things. Because that's the thing, like we were talking about B2B businesses and looking at one business compared to the next one. There's so much that happens between those. You get into something like real-time quoting, right? So somebody, they've got an account set up with your business, and they're trying to order something that is not, under contract or something that they haven't ordered before. And so they're initiating a quote for that. So what are the steps that go along with that quote, right? Does it go to the sales rep? Once the sales rep approves it, then where does it go from there? Are there specific dollar amounts? What are the approval levels? It starts to get, again, very complex and can be kind of overwhelming when looking at that. KIBO comes with an approach of, we can configure every step for that, right? So if it's a purchase over 10,000, you need, a VP level approval for something like that, or maybe 10,000 is nothing compared to your business. You're operating at the hundreds of thousands level. Like, all of that stuff can be configured for the real-time quoting. And that's just kind of one example. We've talked about the order routing, and that's inherent for both B2B and B2C. The agentic piece, the AI piece, as we start to get into that, we didn't really discuss a lot of that. And I'm honestly kind of grateful, because I feel like that's what I talk about all the time now. It's kind of what the nature of the industry is.
It's still on my list.
Yeah.
Here.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll answer the question and then you won't have to answer it. But, everybody's going to have kind of that shopper agent that they've got sitting, on their storefront. And it's going to help to be able to, find products. I think in B2B, it's going to be way more helpful than it is in B2C. The buzz is in B2C right now, but with the way B2B orders can come together, especially, distributors and manufacturers, or, when you're trying to customize specific products, and you're trying to find pieces and parts, and part numbers are just slightly off. Like, I feel like that's going to be huge, way more for B2B than B2C. But the other piece that I think is going to be super helpful is, how is agentic being used kind of behind the scenes, right? If somebody's looking for an order, or they need to initiate a return, or maybe they just need help filling out catalog descriptions, like short and long descriptions, or SEO metadata for their products, right? Can an agentic can an AI agent come in and assist with that? Or, we talked about the complexity of order orchestration or order routing. Can AI agents, can you bring in some LLMs via an AI agent to learn over time? How do you optimize, and what's the best way to structure your specific order routing strategies to be able to take advantage of all of the things that we talked about, and do that in real time? And not only do that, but self-tune at certain points, right? Where it can go in and go, I'm going to make this adjustment, and I'm going to tell you what I did, and this is how I did it, and this is why I did it. I think that's going to be humongous for this. So I think you started with like where KIBO started, where it's at, and I went off on a complete tangent there. But I get excited talking about our products and everything that's out there.
I love it.
So.
I think there's, in B2B, there's some places that haven't been touched for years. Things like EDI, like the whole procurement and EDI side, that you look at what's right before taking over, and EDI is certainly one of them. Just using, we're often using technology from the 1980s to do EDI. And I think AI and AI agents become, very valid ways of replacing that. But my thought with that is that, the more that's automated, automated, the more you have to have better workflow behind the scenes to make sure it's going to the right place, right? Or using the right rules or whatever. So I feel like platforms like OMS become foundational in a commerce platform that you might not even need to use when you had just a website that people were ordering on. But now with further automation, further digitization of those orders, like you have to have a place where all the rules sit of what's going to happen when an order is placed, right? And what do you kind of see as the progression of that over the next couple of years?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And one of the big scary things about when AI came out was it's here and it's taking everyone's job. I don't think that's going to happen. But I do think where AI and agentic AI can really help is in exactly what you say, right? There can be way less, for lack of a better term, touches on all of these steps, right? If somebody's sending in an order, whether that's through EDI or through some other platform, how does that get ingested? How does that then get routed, right? Do you really need somebody in between that's touching this process 3 or 4 times before you get to where the order has then been, routed and sent to the location or locations that are going to fulfill it? I think that AI is going to help out a lot with that. And again, it's not there to out and out replace the existing systems, but to make them more efficient, right? You could still have somebody that's checking in all of that and making sure that it's working the way it should be. But it frees your teams up to focus on other things that may be higher priority. And again, what's higher priority than customer service? But you can really focus on those things and focus on, again, what are the pain points that have always been around that we've never been able to get to? AI is going to free teams up to really focus on those things. And so to answer your question, I think over the next few years, we're just going to see more of that. To your point, if you structure AI and agentic AI in the right way and put the right rules and guardrails in place, it's very effective when you can give it the right information to be able to go and do specific things. I think, where AI gets in trouble and starts to get a black eye is when people are starting to open it up to more and more things. And in doing so, you loosen the guardrails, and then it's just kind of out doing whatever it's looking for, whatever it can find. But when you give it very strict guardrails, very strict processes, very strict parameters on what you want it to do, it's very, very effective. And that's what we're seeing internally in KIBO as well. And we're super excited about being able to add a lot of that to our back-end processes. One of the great things that we pride ourselves on here at KIBO is that our software is very user-friendly, business user-friendly. You don't need to leverage IT or submit a ticket anytime you need to make a change, like to an order routing rule. A business user can go in and do that. But when you start to add in things like agentic that you can say, hey, go create this change for me, it makes it that much easier. And now, again, you're freeing up teams to focus on other things instead of just strict data entry and data handling.
When people buy KIBO, do they always do OMS or is it kind of mixed?
It's kind of mixed. Yeah, we're one of the only solution providers out there that do what we call full stack. So full stack is eCommerce and OMS together. I can think of only one other one that does it. And so, there are times where we'll have, potential customers that'll come to us because they know our OMS offering is strong. And then slowly but surely they bring on kind of more of the e-commerce features.
They can go either direction, like commerce without OMS or OMS without commerce.
Yeah, and can go the other way too. KIBO being it's 100% API first. So we were talking about APIs earlier. It's 100% API first, and what that allows us to do is be able to sell kind of or use bits and pieces, right? So you may have somebody who wants to use our OMS, but they also want to use our cart and checkout from the e-commerce. Cool, no problem. We can set that up. Or they want to be able to use catalog and have all of their products sitting in our catalog, and then that way, if there's any returns or exchanges that need to be done post-purchase, then we've got all of that information, all of the inventory information, basically all the way across. And then maybe they use, a different, discount promotions provider, different CMS provider. It's all in what somebody's looking for sure. And so we do a mix of all of it, any of it, all of it. Like I said, we have people come to us for OMS and that's all they do. People who come to us for e-commerce, that's all they do, or they come to us and slowly over time, other pieces kind of come across, and so it depends on what people are looking for and what they're happy with. And if you've got a CMS that you absolutely love and would never change that, cool, we're totally okay with that.
Where have you guys seen the most success, in manufacturing or distribution?
That's a great question. We've done really well across all of those verticals, manufacturing and distribution and wholesale as well, right? Like we've done pretty well and we have a pretty good portfolio across all of those B2B verticals. I think it comes down to being able to solve and prove that you can solve individual pain points. And as those verticals tend to be quite unique, it's being able to have the flexibility and the tools that are able to solve challenges kind of agnostically. So it's not built for one or for the other. So we've seen great success across all of them. Absolutely.
Very good. How do you guys go to market with services? Do you do a lot of your own services? Do you do services through partners? What's kind of the mix?
Oh, you mean like an implementation kind of thing? Is that what you're talking about? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we're 100% SI partner based. We used to have a full professional services department, and we kind of did both. But a few years ago, we made the decision to strictly go SI based, because really they're the professionals that can get in there and kind of get really hands-on with that stuff and really understand, where a specific client is at and how that, how it's best going to, how KIBO best is going to fit within their infrastructure. Not that we can't understand that, but it's that way of doing business has worked great for us. Now, we've kind of done this thing where we still have a professional services footprint within the company that oversees every single implementation. So as KIBO's being brought to market for someone who's implementing that, we're still heavily involved in that implementation, but the SI partners themselves are the ones that are responsible with kind of getting that up and getting
Is
them
it
live.
SaaS cloud? What's your architecture like?
Yeah. We're SaaS cloud. We are not on-prem, so or on premises. But yeah, we are 100% SaaS cloud, API first. So all of our connections are done via API. That's how information gets passed back and forth. Again, if we're the OMS, we're passing information to the ERP and the eCommerce and the warehouse management system, all via APIs. And so anybody who's out there that is got an API connection, we're able to connect to them. Like I will tell you, that is one of the biggest questions we get across the board. Hey, we're using this specific tool. We're using, Microsoft Dynamics, or we're using, whatever the tool is. Hey, can you connect to that? It's like, yeah, absolutely. I mean, as long as they got an API, and who doesn't have an API at this point, we can make a connection, and we can get that information passed back and forth.
Amazing. So Ty, just as we kind of close out here, if someone is, maybe hearing about order management for the first time, or starting to consider OMS order management systems, what are some of the first steps that people should be thinking through?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'll kind of try to distill some of the things that we talked about over this conversation, if just to kind of get some people thinking about this. But really, as you look at your business, what are the pain points that you have, and are they related to things like inventory? Do you need something that is going to provide you with a source of real-time inventory and a source of available to sell and available to promise and future inventory, and need to know that kind of on a more real-time basis? Do you need access to that? One of the other pieces that I've talked about, and this won't be shocking to anyone, but is the order orchestration or order routing piece. Like, there may be some listeners out there that haven't thought about that before, but there's a lot of complexity that can go into that. And as these businesses start to see more of that complexity, it's tempting to start bolting things onto your ERP, or start putting more connections in that can handle a lot of this stuff. And like I mentioned, that starts to Frankenstein, and that causes a couple of problems, right? One of them is that now that's a fail point, right? That could be something that fails, and then it knocks everything offline. And secondarily, it can be very expensive to do a lot of that stuff. So does it make more sense from a cost point of view, to kind of simplify your ERP back down to what it was meant to do in the first place, bring in an OMS that can handle all of these things natively, and then again, you've got way less touch points at that point, way less opportunities for something to fail, and everything runs a heck of a lot smoothly at that point. So that's where I would say you should start at when considering an OMS.
I think your point about like reducing the things that an ERP does, I think everyone listening to this can get behind that statement, right? Between the cost and the complexity and just the architecture of most ERPs, let's reduce what we're doing in the ERP. Let the ERP do what it's good at, right? I'm not reducing it from a value standpoint, but let it do what it does best. As we close this out, I was thinking about, I started in B2B commerce in 2005, and the first platform that was ever made specifically for B2B commerce in the 2000s, they saw the complexity of ordering systems and order routing, order orchestration, all the things that we talked about. And they built an e-commerce platform around OMS. I mean, that's what the whole thing was built around. It was they saw such complexity in how orders were built, how they're split up, how they're shipped, how they're fulfilled, how they're warehoused, all of that. And they started there. And for many companies, OMS is not like an add-on. It's not an extra thing. It is actually a foundational element inside of their commerce stack. And so, kind of thinking about what you guys have done with putting this into a single stack and single architecture, I think is pretty impressive. Ty, appreciate it. Nice to meet you, and appreciate you coming on the podcast here.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Justin. Thanks for the time.
Manufacturers, distributors, leaders in the zone. If you're building B2B, this the podcast throne. The industry's heartbeat, we're setting the tone. Turn insights to actions, it's how empires are grown. We're talking change management, breaking resistance. Strategies so sharp, they redefine persistence. Customer adoption, it's more than retention. It's building a movement, commanding attention. It's the B2B e-commerce show, where the vision is clear and the strategies glow. From the top of the globe, we're the pros who know. Turn the volume up loud, it's time to grow. We bring news, big topics, insights to spark. From the boardroom's glow to the warehouse dark. Digital transformations, the path we're paving. Helping you lead through the change you're facing. This is more than a podcast, it's the industry's voice. Giving you the tools to make the right choice. No fluff, just facts, no hype, just action. The show where solutions are more than a fraction. It's the B2B e-commerce show, where the vision is clear and the strategies glow. From the top of the globe, we're the pros who know. Turn the volume up loud, it's time to grow.
This is your guide to the digital race. Practical advice, no time to waste. So tune in, gear up, and let's own the space. It's the B2B e-commerce show, the industry's base.